In my previous videos, we covered Halo's oldest Easter egg in an attempt at understanding the meaning behind Zeta Halo's ancient text that originates from Halo 3's Sand Trap. In this video, we'll try to craft a theory behind a different ancient mystery. Scattered across Zeta Halo are these mysterious relics that you've definitely stumbled upon at some point. Connected to them, runes that Despondent Pyre translates herself. Now, I personally do not see any runes on the relics, which is odd, but perhaps the monitor of Zeta Halo can see something that I can't. Luckily, she translates the runes to the phrase enemy within, which is the same phrase that shows up written in stone in Halo Infinite's 2018 E3 trailer. A clear-cut reference to the Endless imprisoned within Zeta Halo, or so most people think. Even in Despondent's audio logs, she admits that the text predates her, and even predates the Forerunners. If so, the enemy within symbols carved into these relics would predate the Endless's imprisonment. With no enemy within to refer to, what is the writing referring to? Maybe you think, well, if these artifacts predate the ring they're on, perhaps they were brought from somewhere else, implanted by Forerunners who discovered them in an attempt at preservation when the array was eventually fired, similar to how they preserve species in silexes. If that's the case, that whoever wrote enemy within on these artifacts was long gone, and that whatever enemy they were referring to was somewhere else in the galaxy, why does the same phrase end up carved into stone beneath Zeta Halo? Logically, this would mean that someone who knew how to write the pre-Forerunner text was walking around Zeta Halo long enough to carve it. Though why would they bother carving enemy within if they've been ripped from their homeworld where the enemy allegedly existed? And why didn't Despondent know about the species that was implanted and subsequently carved the text in stone? She could have just asked them its meaning. The logic wasn't adding up, so I decided to dig a little deeper. Upon listening to all of Despondent Pyre's audio logs again, I had a lightbulb moment. Pyre studies the artifacts for thousands of years, claiming that their history is constantly rewritten. Thereafter, she refers to the concept of time.
And if nothing else, I have time.
And again.
Time continues to be on my mind.
And again.
Time moves forward and back again. And I see rings inside of rings.
Perhaps the artifacts are in fact older than the Forerunners, but were also created by the Forerunners. Think about it like this. When Despondent says that the artifacts predate the Forerunners, it's not that the artifacts were built before the Forerunners, but that the artifacts are aging faster than the Forerunners. Perhaps they are passing through time at a quicker rate than the species that created them, allowing them to appear older from Despondent's perspective. But what technology did the Forerunners have to achieve this, and why would such a device even exist? Well, I think I may have found the answer. Time locks. Red Nomster, what's a time lock? A time lock is a technology that the Sans Shayum used before the firing of the array 100,000 years ago. Even ancient humans used them during their mutual alliance. As the name implies, it locks time, trapping whatever's inside. In theory, the silexes you see throughout Halo Infinite are likely a form of time lock. The Harbinger is released from her silex the same age and containing the same memories from before her imprisonment. Now, this doesn't actually align with our theory at all, really, as a time lock would actually age less as no time passes inside, and the technology wasn't even Forerunner. But there may be hope for this theory just yet. More supporting evidence that the relics on Zeta Halo are Forerunner despite predating Forerunners is the design imprinted onto them. It's a design used often throughout Zeta Halo's inner workings, showing up several times in several different places throughout the game. Not to mention, the achievement for collecting all 7 artifacts refers to them as Forerunner artifacts specifically. But other than in-game evidence, lore appears to support this theory as well. Forerunners invented the reverse time lock. A reverse time lock, as you may have guessed already, speeds up time. Reverse time locks were used by Forerunners exclusively as a form of execution. The Issodidact, if you've seen my previous theory videos, is thought to be a member of the Criterion. The same Criterion that condemned the Endless to their Silex prison. Lore tells us that the Issodidact used a reverse time lock to execute the Primordial on Zeta Halo, forcing the being to disintegrate via the process of entropy through the artificially induced passage of 1 billion years. The fact that reverse time locks were present on this very ring, and can also explain the increased age of these artifacts due to the increased rate of their passage through time, leads me to believe that the artifacts themselves are reverse time locks. And what better to write on your ring of execution than the phrase enemy within? Clearly, the phrase now makes sense showing up on these relics. But what about the same phrase that's carved into stone? I'll admit, this one stumped me for a while. At first glance, this carving seems completely disconnected from the relics themselves. Naturally, I rewatched the 5-second clip dozens of times. I sped it up, I went frame by frame, then something finally clicked. Perhaps that's no stone wall that the runes are carved in. That's another relic itself. Take note of the eroded material of this relic compared with this alleged stone wall. And notice how the very first scene from this trailer shows these relics underground, creating the backbone of this tunnel itself. Now take note of this tunnel and the ringed structure it appears to have. As the quote goes, this cave is not a natural formation. And let's color outside the lines for a moment and remove our focus from the runes themselves. More runes seem to appear. As Despondent Pyre says herself when deciphering the relics, I'm beginning to see rings inside of rings. Even the bottom of the carving appears to have runes. If flipped upside down, they appear to be rings in a row, half buried into the sand. Just like the following scene in the trailer. Now, there are some instances that seem to infer that the artifacts are something else entirely. Looking back at the achievement for collecting all 7 artifacts, the achievement itself is called Haruspis. This leads many theorists to believe that the artifacts are connected to the domain, as Haruspis was a title given to forerunners entrusted with studying the domain. For those of you unaware, the domain was an immaterial reserve of knowledge cataloging the history of all forerunners. I'm not so easily convinced that the artifacts have anything to do with the domain though. Digging deeper than the surface level title of Haruspis, we can infer that the achievement name is referring to the player quite literally cataloging the history of the forerunners by rediscovering their relics. And digging deeper into the lore, it's known that a Haruspis oversaw their religious associates who were in charge of important Forerunner rituals. One such ritual is the cryptum hibernation process, in which a Forerunner would enter a stasis chamber as a means of exile. If the artifacts are in fact reverse time locks used for ritual executions, it's likely that a Haruspis and their associates would be involved in the process. Now, there is one troubling problem with my reverse time lock theory though. I couldn't quite articulate why there were so many of them scattered around Zeta Halo, or why the rings often appear in groups. You'd think a location of ritual execution would be self-contained to a specific location, sort of like the Silent Auditorium. I mean, it'd be great if we had some sort of insight on what time locks actually look like or how they're set up. Unfortunately, this magnificent work of concept art is all I could find. The time lock itself does appear to be circular, but I wouldn't hang this picture on my fridge even if my child drew it, so I'm not really banking on it as evidence for this video either.
As I look to the sky, I am struck by a thought.
Perhaps they were scattered for a reason, maybe even as a marker. I went ahead and mapped the position of all 7 relics on the map and connected them as if they were some sort of constellation. I compared my fridge-worthy art with real constellations but had no success. I decided I'd compare the design with Halo Infinite's starry sky instead, but at the end of the day, I am no astronomer. As an imaginary archaeologist, I kept digging. I dug the same place the Banished dug, looking into if maybe they had any insight that I didn't. It appeared that they unearthed some of these artifacts and were attempting to repair them for some reason. I roamed around thinking, perhaps they failed at repairing the artifacts not because they're dumb brutes, but because the artifacts weren't broken to begin with. I took a step back and shared a revelation with Despondent Pyre. I wasn't just looking at independent relics anymore. I was beginning to see rings inside of rings. And these rings within rings, correlated with constellations, I've seen them before. As shown in that Halo CE terminal video, circular type is a Forerunner language that appears throughout Halo as a whole. It appears on star maps, it appears as coordinates, and somehow connecting to my previous videos, it even appears on the Eld symbol referencing the Mantle of Responsibility. The translation goes like this: guardianship for all living things lies with those whose evolution is most complete. The Mantle of Responsibility shelters all. Perhaps it's no coincidence that these artifacts appear alongside a Halo ring filled to the brim with the ancient text. Though this may offer more insight as to why the artifacts are oriented the way they are, it still failed to explain how they ended up on Zeta Halo's surface. If they are reverse time locks that are used to execute things, why would they be haphazardly scattered, some even appearing on a completely different side of the ring, according to Halo Infinite's end cutscene? Now usually at this point I'd continue down the rabbit hole for answers, but the answers were right in front of us the whole time. Looking at the end cutscene, Chief portals through space and possibly even through time. He ends up at the location harboring 7 more of these ancient artifacts. At first glance, you may assume that Chief was portaled to the rings for a reason. Maybe these rings are even part of the portal, but I don't think that's the case. The theory goes like this. I don't think these artifacts are the destination, I think they were once the passengers. Just like Chief, they were cast out of the silent auditorium to distant, remote parts of the ring. To preface, here's an excerpt from the book Halo Primordium. The captive was decaying from within. What sort of cage was this? The misty blue light seemed to vibrate, and a high, singing sound reverberated through the hemisphere. The didact choked on his fury and doubled over, contorted with his own agony, his own awareness of a great crime about to be committed. The didact hesitated for just an instant, as if trying to understand, but anger overcame him. He made a swift gesture like a swinging sword. The mesh around the captive's platform spread between them a far more intense blue glow. You were made to survive deep time, but now it will arrive all at once. Let 1 billion years pass in endless silence and isolation. The primordial's head split down the middle, and the 2 faceted eyes lay for a moment atop a pile of cascading gray dust. They glinted in the dead blue light. The dust became finer and finer, and then everything stopped. As far as the story goes, I think the didact executed the primordial in the silent auditorium using these artifacts. As the didact recognizes the crimes towards the mantle before he even commits it, I think the artifacts were portaled away thereafter out of shame and in an attempt to hide evidence from Forerunner history. And after you unlock all 7 artifacts, the weapon sums up this theory quite well.
Imagine needing to carve your apology onto an eternal slate, but not to say sorry, to warn, to confess.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to share your theories about the artifact mystery or about the ancient text mystery, join my Discord linked in the description of this video. We're lingering around 500 members right now, and I'm very active in there, so I'm excited to see more of your guys' theories. If you guys want to see more theories and deep dives, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.